The Clarence trip was done in April 2024. There are three of us. I'm Steve Muir, Tim Mora from Greymouth, and Steve Tellon from Wellington. All met in Hamner Springs. We stayed the night so we could get up for an early start the next day. We had been a bit nervous about the weather forecast and the river level before we started. There's a bit of a northwest system building as the week went on and was planned to spill over into the Kaikoura catchment with some potentially quite heavy rain. And the river level was very low, so the Clarence was 2 cumecs and the Acheron was slightly more at about 2.5, but less than 5 cumecs in total in both the rivers. So your low river levels coupled with some potentially strong headwinds with rain spilling into the catchment meant we were a wee bit nervous, but we thought it was an acceptable risk, and so we went ahead with the trip. We were treated to a beautiful day on the day that we started, on the 8th. Fantastic sunny day, beautiful colours of the rising sun setting off, and some lovely river to go down. The river level was actually better than I expected. We didn't have to walk in the first few rapids, and in the whole first day we probably walked 1.5 dozen times and very short distances just to get over the edge of a braided section to get back into the main channel. So pretty acceptable as far as walk times went. We wanted to get an early start because we had the Chute rapid to negotiate further down the river, which someone had drowned there earlier in the year, so there was a bit of nervousness about that rapid, so we wanted to have plenty of time, and we didn't want to be doing that on dusk. As it happened, we got there in very good time, so there's no problems with lack of sunshine when we got there. So this is the chute here. Steve Tellon is going down this. This is the first approach, and you can see the finger is that rock on the left. It's pointing up as the rock to avoid. If you get pinned in there, it's quite bad. If you keep right, it is pretty acceptable. So Steve's a very good paddler, so he managed it. This is me, Steve Muir, coming down. I hit a rock at the start which kind of put me a wee bit off balance, but managed to get that a right hand turn at the critical moment, so managed to avoid the pinch onto the left. Not as elegant as Steve Tellon, but I got through pretty happily. Tim Mora opted to portage his raft around there just to be cautious, but we all got through pretty successfully. The low flow was pretty good. The stacks of goats everywhere around, as often you go around a corner and there's a family of 10 goats or half a dozen goats or 15 goats, and if you wanted to shoot one, they're pretty easy to get. They sort of do a token gesture at running, but not too hard to pop off. Beautiful autumn colours, some nice still parts where you can see some reflections, and lots of fun rapids to go down. The low river flow meant there was plenty of bottom shuffling to get across some of the braids, and occasional walks, but a lot of them you could get across with just a bit of a wriggle, and through you went. It's a nice little waterfall coming in to the edge of the river there. Was pretty good. We called into Big Eddy Camp, which is a really nice spot, lots of willow trees around, and very pleasantly surprised to find a good patch of blackberries in full fruit. So we picked some of those, and I enjoyed some for my supper and some for breakfast. It was a nice treat. We'd arrived in very calm conditions. At about 1 o'clock in the morning, we were in our tents, and this huge wind blew up. It was pretty brutal. And we spent the rest of the night. I was worrying quite a lot about what it was going to be like paddling in that strength of wind. I was worried my tent was going to get ripped apart, And at one stage I thought I was dreaming that I was getting sandblasted in the face with sand, and realised I wasn't dreaming, I was actually awake. And sand was being forced up under the edge of my fly and through the mesh of my tent, and smashing me and filling up my tent with sand. That was pretty unpleasant. But fortunately we woke up and the day was remarkably good. It was a lovely morning. And the wind died down until we got to Palmer Hut. You can see Palmer Hut over on the right there. This is Steve Talon battling into the wind. You can see the standing waves here. This is actually a rapid. We're going down, but hardly making any progress. There were times we were being pushed backwards up the river with the strength of this wind. It's a big open valley, and the wind was just howling straight into our faces. We could see in the distance that the valley narrowed up, but this was a very long stretch. It took hours of battling that headwind before we finally got out. We had to get out and walk at some stages because we just couldn't make progress, and we were fighting the wind for 10 minutes or more, exhausting ourselves with the paddling. But eventually we got into this more sheltered canyon and spectacular rocks and some more great rapids, and then the wind was fine. So it was quite variable, that wind. Sometimes it was really harsh, other times it was pretty good. And the gorges are spectacular, these huge rock faces that just twist and turn in on themselves in spectacular fashion with amazing geology along the rocks. The sedimentary layers that have been tilted up onto their side are quite impressive. So yeah, pretty amazing country to be going through.
Yeah, nice one to finish on.
We left Forbes Hut. It was a pretty early start. We had 52 kilometres to paddle, so we wanted to get on the river as early as we could. We were a bit worried about the wind coming up again. It's a beautiful sunrise as we're paddling along. It was a really nice way to start the day, and a lovely journey down through the river. Lots more good rapids to traverse. The wind kind of picked up here and there, but it was just a squally, so we could wait out the squalls and then carry on. And a lot of it was tailwind and pretty mild. Conditions. These rock gardens are really fun, lots of weaving in between the rocks. It's just good fun. There's plenty of time to react and turn, but quite entertaining. This is a dam buster. This was one of the rapids that we were worried about. Landslide had blocked the river, potentially some sharp rocks, but there's a good clear line down through the middle with low flow, made it pretty manageable. So Steve Talon led the way, and Tim straight behind him took the straight line down. We'd sort of talked before about the chicken route, which was off to the right. So that was the route I decided to take, which in the end was probably a mistake because it ended up being a little more awkward than just going straight through the middle. But anyway, that's what I did, and we all got through pretty happily. A bit more bumpy the way I took it, but pretty straightforward, with the river flow being nice and low.
Yeah, the rock's definitely not like punchy or very sharp. bottle.
Bottle back? Ah. The scenery was pretty good all along this section. Got some great glimpses of the seaward kokoras and the inland kokoras, with Mount Alarm particularly in the distance, getting ever closer. The rapids were again pretty fun. Surprised how much of a tailwind we had in this section. Was a pleasant surprise. But yeah, the westerly sort of, and we're going quite a long way east, was actually behind us for most of this day, which is a good relief because it was a long day. Had we had a headwind in this section, it would have been pretty brutal. The day before had tired us out with the sections of headwind that we'd had, so with this long day it was pretty nice to have a tailwind behind us all the way. Lots of fantastic rock formations and some fresh evidence of landslide kind of activity as well. But all very beautiful, and the river was just gorgeous to be paddling on. It's very nice to be able to drink the water as we go along. It's great just being able to go out and drink as we go. We got to Snowgrass Hut and it's just completely still after having a fairly vigorous tailwind behind us. It was quite surprising to get to this place and absolutely still, not a breath of air when we arrived. We got up the next day, again fairly early, and the wind was howling. It had come up in the night and was pretty vicious. We did debate whether it was safe to even leave the hut, but we opted, given how variable it had been the days before, we thought, yeah, maybe get around the corner and it'll be fine. I was a bit worried that it wouldn't be. In fact, we hit this one incredibly strong patch. You can see the dust clouds flying and couldn't make any progress into the wind. You'd see this wall of water just coming up towards us, the spray being whipped up by the squall. I was forced into a leady in the rock, as was Steve Talon. Tim had just got round the corner before the squall really hit us in full force, but there's nothing we could do. We just couldn't make any progress against it. We just had to wait out a few minutes for it to pass, and once it died down a little, then we could power on as much. It took all of our strength to paddle against the wind, even after it died down a bit.
Pretty crazy, isn't it? Let's try a bit further, but we'll try a bit further anyway. You get our break around the corner. Maybe it's now while it's
So we managed to get out of the eddy and round the corner, and remarkably it was fine for the rest of the day. There's a few other puffs of wind in our face, not quite as vicious as this one, but it's incredibly varied in the canyons and around the gorges as to what the wind is doing. So it can go from being disastrous, like quite seriously bad wind, to being pretty benign just round one corner. River flow was still pretty much hadn't changed. This was a day where the weather forecast had threatened to spill over, but we still had a few walks because the river low was pretty low. Not too many though, still pretty acceptable. And by this stage, having been sitting down for this is our fourth day, we were pretty happy to get out and stretch the legs now and then. That wasn't a bad option. That's the nose, I believe, the nose basher. There's a few other aptly named rapids called Jawbreaker and Nose Basher, named after people who I guess have crashed into them. Again, low river flow, they were pretty easy to negotiate. Not too many problems getting around those corners. While we were at the Snowgrass Hut, we heard this incredibly loud roar of engines going up the river and thought, oh, it must be jet boats. Then we kind of thought about it and thought, no, it's such a low river flow, there's no way a jet boat would be able to get up the very shallow braids. No, jet boats are pretty impressive where they can go, but even so, there's just no way a jet boat could get up. So we kind of thought it must be a hovercraft, but I'd never seen a hovercraft operating in the South Island before. Day 5 we actually found out that they were in fact hovercrafts because they stopped at the same camp that we were stopped at. A couple of guys from Nelson who build their own hovercraft were out on the Day 5, we were at the Matai camp. We arrived fairly early in the day. It was a nice easy day, which was a relief after the previous days. It rained from about dinner time right through the night to the next day. Just a light rain where we were, but it had been raining pretty heavy further up the valley. Tim went down to have a look at the river and came back and said, I think it's about 3 times the volume that it was the day before. It turns out it was almost 30 times the volume. Gone from less than 3 cumecs in the Acheron to 140 cumecs, so 28 times increase in volume. So it was a big muddy brown swell. So this was a day we were expecting a fairly slow, boring trip down wide braided river. In fact, it was anything but boring. The big wave trains generated by the high water flow were fantastic fun, not dangerous, so that was good, but great fun and very fast. So we increased our average speed from about 4.5 kilometres an hour to well over 12 kilometres an hour. So very fast journey out. Cool southerly wind blowing, but not too much trouble keeping warm while we're paddling, and made really good time all the way out to the bridge end with lots of fun wave trains to carry us in good speed down to the end of the river. Tim had a friend who picked us up from Kaikoura and shuttled us back to Hamner Springs, which was really appreciated, and a pretty good trip all round. Hauling the rafts up the riverbank proved to be quite a bit of a challenge. There's no path up there, so there's a bit of bush bashing through a whole bunch of scrub. We went to the right of the bridge where we could shelter, waiting for our ride to pick us up. But the scramble up through the scrub there was harder than I anticipated, but there's a good spot to wait under the bridge for our ride to come and pick us up. One of the things we didn't think about was drinking water. We had very little drinking water with us, so we got a bit thirsty by the time we got to the end. We didn't fancy drinking the brown sludgy stuff, so we had to wait till we got to Kokora to top up our water supplies.